The whip cracked against Arya's scarred back as she scrubbed the marble floors with her own blood, but what made her freeze wasn't the pain. It was the intoxicating scent of pine and midnight that suddenly filled the dungeon, followed by a growl so deep it shook the very foundations of the slave quarters. Arya's hands trembled as she pressed the rough brush harder against the stone, trying to disappear into the shadows where she belonged. 22 years of beatings had taught her that invisibility was survival, that the moment anyone noticed her was the moment fresh wounds would bloom across her skin. "Faster, you worthless mongrel!" Beta Marcus's boot connected with her ribs, sending her sprawling across the wet floor. The Alpha King arrives within the hour, and if even one speck of dirt offends his eyes, I'll make sure you won't be eating for a week. Arya bit back a whimper, tasting copper as she dragged herself upright. A week without food was nothing new. She'd survived longer on scraps and rainwater. What terrified her was the mention of the Alpha King. Ryder Stormwind was legend among werewolves, a warrior who'd unified the northern territories through sheer dominance. Stories said he could scent a lie from a mile away, and that his wolf was so powerful it could force a shift on any werewolf within his presence. Stories also said he executed the weak without mercy. The dungeon door burst open, flooding the space with afternoon sunlight that made Arya's eyes water. Alpha Garrett's heavy footsteps echoed off the walls as he descended, his massive frame casting shadows that seemed to swallow what little light remained. "Where is she?" His voice was ice and venom. "Where's the abomination?" Arya's breath caught. He meant her. He always meant her. Born wolfless to a mother who'd died in childbirth, she was the pack's greatest shame. A constant reminder that their bloodlines weren't as pure as they claimed. "Here, Alpha." Marcus yanked her to her feet by her matted brown hair, ignoring her gasp of pain. "Should we move her to the outer cells? Keep her away from—" "No." Garrett's pale eyes fixed on Arya with familiar disgust. "She stays exactly where she is. The king must never know she exists. Do you understand me?" Something cold twisted in Arya's stomach. She'd always wondered why Garrett kept her alive when killing her would have been easier. The answer in his eyes now terrified her more than any beating ever had. "Alpha," Marcus ventured carefully, "perhaps it would be safer to—" "I said no." Garrett's roar made the chains hanging from the walls rattle. "She doesn't leave this dungeon. She doesn't speak. She doesn't even breathe loudly. And if the king somehow discovers her—" His smile was razor-sharp. "Well, accidents happen all the time in the slave quarters." The threat hung in the air like smoke as both men left, their footsteps fading into the corridors above. Arya sank back to her knees, scrubbing at bloodstains that would never truly disappear. Her fingers worked automatically while her mind raced. Why was Garrett so afraid? The scent hit her first, pine forests after midnight storms, wild and clean and utterly masculine. It flooded her senses with an intensity that made her head spin, made something deep in her chest ache with longing she'd never felt before. Impossible. She was wolfless. She couldn't scent anything beyond basic smells. Heavy footsteps approached the dungeon, different from Garrett's purposeful stride or Marcus's nervous shuffle. These steps spoke of contained power, of a predator who moved with deadly grace. The scent grew stronger, wrapping around her like a caress. "This is our lower level." Garrett's voice drifted down, tight with barely concealed anxiety. "Just storage and maintenance areas. Nothing that would interest your majesty. I'll be the judge of that." The responding voice was whiskey over gravel, authority wrapped in silk. "I inspect every inch of territory under my rule, Alpha Garrett. Surely you understand. Terror and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope, warred in Arya's chest. She pressed herself against the farthest wall, praying the shadows would hide her, praying her hammering heart wouldn't give her away. The footsteps grew closer. A growl rumbled through the dungeon, so deep and primal it seemed to vibrate in her bones. It wasn't threatening, it was searching, calling to something she didn't understand. What was that sound? The Alpha King's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. Nothing, your majesty. Perhaps some pipes." "Don't lie to me, Garrett." Each word dripped menace. "My wolf doesn't respond to pipes." Light flooded the dungeon as the door swung wide. Arya squeezed her eyes shut, but she couldn't block out the scent that now surrounded her like a living thing. Pine and midnight and something else, something that called to every cell in her body. "Mate!" The thought slammed into her consciousness with such force she gasped aloud. Her eyes flew open, meeting a gaze that stole what little breath she had left. Alpha King Ryder Stormwind stood in the doorway like an avenging angel carved from moonlight and shadow. Dark hair fell across a face that could have been sculpted by the gods themselves. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that spoke of unwavering determination, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to see straight through to her soul. But it was those eyes that made her world tilt on its axis. They were fixed on her with an intensity that should have terrified her, filled with recognition that made no sense, with a hunger that awakened something she'd thought died long ago. Hope. Well, well, Ryder said softly, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. What have we here? Behind him, Alpha Garrett had gone white as fresh snow. Your Majesty, she's nothing. Just a slave, worthless. Worthless? Ryder's laugh was sharp as broken glass. He took a step into the dungeon, and Arya's entire body responded to his presence like a flower turning toward the sun. My wolf would disagree. Another step. The scent of him filled her lungs, made her skin tingle with electricity she'd never felt. She's wolfless, Garrett said desperately. Born defective. We keep her for menial labor, nothing more. Wolfless. Ryder's eyes never left Arya's face. How interesting. Tell me, little one. His voice gentled, though power still thrummed beneath every word. What's your name? Arya opened her mouth, then closed it. Speaking without permission meant punishment. But the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was something precious instead of broken, it made her brave. Arya, she whispered. Arya Blackwood. The effect was immediate. Ryder went perfectly still, his eyes flashing with something dangerous and bright. Behind him, Garrett's face drained of what little color remained. Blackwood, Ryder repeated slowly, and something in his tone made Arya's skin prickle with awareness. How very interesting indeed. He moved closer, and she caught the exact moment his scent changed, became richer, wilder, tinged with something that made her pulse race. When he knelt in front of her, bringing their faces level, she could see gold flecks dancing in his storm-gray eyes. Tell me, Arya Blackwood, he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper that made her shiver. Can you smell me? The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Garrett's sharp intake of breath echoed in the sudden silence. Arya's mind raced. She should lie, should deny the impossible thing happening to her, should protect whatever secret had Garrett so terrified. But looking into Ryder's eyes, she found she couldn't lie. Not to him. Yes, she breathed. His smile was fierce and beautiful and full of promises she didn't understand. I thought so. Behind him, Alpha Garrett stumbled backward. Your Majesty, surely you're not suggesting. This is impossible. She's been tested. She has no wolf, no abilities. Has she? Ryder stood slowly, his movement fluid as water, deadly as a blade. Or have you simply made sure she believed that? The accusation cracked through the air like lightning. Arya looked between the two alphas, her heart hammering against her ribs. What was Ryder suggesting? What didn't she understand? I don't know what you're implying, Garrett said stiffly, but sweat beaded his forehead. The girl is exactly what I said. The girl, Ryder interrupted, his voice dropping to a growl that raised every hair on Arya's arms, carries a scent that's been haunting my wolf for days. The girl's eyes hold secrets you clearly don't want me to discover. And the girl, his gaze found Arya's again, burning with intensity that made her soul ache, responds to my presence in ways that should be impossible for someone truly wolfless. He took another step forward, and Garrett instinctively backed away. So I'll ask you once more, Alpha Garrett, and I suggest you choose your words very carefully. Ryder's smile was all predator now, beautiful and terrible. What exactly have you been hiding from me about Arya Blackwood? Wanting to see what would happen next? Subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Arya pressed herself against the cold stone wall, watching Alpha Garrett's face cycle through emotions she'd never seen him display. Fear, calculation, and something that looked almost like guilt. Your Majesty, Garrett began carefully. I assure you there's nothing. Nothing. Ryder's voice cut through the dungeon like a blade. He moved with fluid grace, circling Garrett like a wolf stalking prey. Then you won't mind if I invoke the right of claiming. The words hit the air like a physical blow. Garrett stumbled backward, his face draining of all color. You cannot be serious, he breathed. She's a slave. A wolfless nothing. The right of claiming is reserved for any individual I deem worthy of my personal protection, Ryder finished smoothly. Are you questioning my judgment, Alpha Garrett? Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard whispers of the right of claiming in the servant quarters. An ancient law that allowed the Alpha King to claim protection over any werewolf he chose, removing them from their pack's authority entirely. It hadn't been invoked in over a century. "I!" Garrett's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "The council would never." "The council serves at my pleasure," Ryder said with deadly quiet. "Not the other way around." His storm-gray eyes found Aria's again, and she felt that same electric jolt race through her body. "I, Ryder Stormwind, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, invoke the right of claiming over Aria Blackwood. She is hereby under my personal protection, answerable to no authority but mine." The formal declaration seemed to charge the very air around them. Aria felt something shift inside her chest, like chains she'd never realized were there suddenly loosening. But with that freedom came terror so sharp it stole her breath. "No," she whispered, the word torn from her throat. "Please, I can't." Both alphas turned to her, but their expressions couldn't have been more different. Garrett's face held triumph, as if her refusal proved his point about her worthlessness. Ryder's held something gentler, something that looked almost like understanding. "What frightens you, little one?" Ryder asked softly, crouching down to her level again. "The protection I'm offering, or the freedom that comes with it?" Freedom. The word tasted foreign on her tongue, impossible and dangerous. Aria had never known anything but servitude, had never imagined a world where she wasn't at the mercy of others' cruelty. "I don't understand," she said honestly. "Why would you? I'm nothing special. I'm exactly what Alpha Garrett said, wolfless, worthless." "Stop." The command in Ryder's voice made her fall silent instantly. "You will not speak of yourself that way. Not now, not ever." The fierce protectiveness in his tone made something warm unfurl in her chest, something she'd thought died years ago. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. Behind Ryder, Garrett was backing toward the door, his movements subtle but urgent. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss this upstairs. Let me show you to more comfortable quarters." "I'm perfectly comfortable here," Ryder said without turning around. "In fact, I think I'll stay and get to know my new ward better. Alone." The threat was unmistakable. Garrett's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment before he managed a stiff nod. "Of course. I'll be in my office if you need anything." He fled up the stairs like demons were chasing him, leaving Aria alone with the most powerful werewolf in the Northern Territories. The silence that followed felt different from before, less charged with violence but somehow more intimate. "Now then," Ryder said gently, settling cross-legged on the floor in front of her, as if dungeon stones were the finest silk. "Suppose you tell me about yourself, Aria Blackwood." She stared at him, this legend-made flesh who sat in filth without complaint, who looked at her like she mattered. "There's nothing to tell." "I doubt that." His smile was warm now, coaxing. "Start with your parents. Your mother, what was her name?" Pain lanced through Aria's chest, as sharp and fresh as the day she'd first understood what her existence meant to the pack. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Blackwood. She died when I was born." "And your father?" The simple question opened wounds Aria had spent years learning to ignore. "I don't know. No one ever told me, and I learned not to ask." Ryder's eyes sharpened with interest. "Why?" "Because every time she'd asked as a child, the beatings had been worse. Because the mere mention of her parentage sent Alpha Garrett into rages that left her bloodied and broken. Because she'd learned that some truths were too dangerous to seek. They said my mother was attacked," she said finally, the words scraped raw from her throat. "By a rogue Alpha. They said she never recovered from what he did to her, that having me killed her." The familiar shame washed over her, 22 years of blame and guilt. "They said I was cursed from birth, that I killed the only person who might have loved me. They lied." The flat certainty in Ryder's voice made her head snap up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "How do you know?" she asked. "Because I knew your mother." The world tilted sideways. Aria's breath caught in her throat as Ryder's words hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Elena Blackwood was the daughter of my father's beta," Ryder continued, his voice gentle but implacable. "She was visiting our territory on pack business when she disappeared. We searched for months, assumed she'd been killed by rogues." His eyes darkened. "I never imagined Garrett had taken her." "Taken her." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Aria's stomach churn. "You're saying she didn't die in childbirth?" "I'm saying a lot of things don't add up, little one." Ryder's hand moved as if to touch her face, then stopped, his fingers clenching into a fist. "But we're going to find the truth. I promise you that." Footsteps echoed down the stairs, lighter than Garrett's, more purposeful than the servants'. A man appeared in the doorway, tall and lean with sandy hair and intelligent blue eyes. His posture screamed military precision, but when he looked at Ryder, there was genuine warmth there. "Your Majesty," the newcomer said with a slight bow. "I've completed my initial review of the pack records." "Tristan." Ryder stood smoothly, every inch the Alpha King once more. "What did you find?" Tristan's gaze flicked to Arya, then back to his king. "Inconsistencies. Significant ones. The birth certificate lists Elena Blackwood as deceased, cause of death listed as complications from childbirth. But there's no death certificate on file, no burial record, no witness statements. It's as if she simply vanished." "Interesting." Ryder's voice had gone cold. "What else?" "The medical records are heavily redacted. What I could read suggests the birth was traumatic, but not in the way one would expect from a normal delivery." Tristan hesitated. "Sire, some of the terminology used, it suggests magical intervention." "Magic." The word sent ice through Arya's veins. Magic was forbidden in most territories, practiced only by the most desperate, or the most corrupt. "Keep digging," Ryder ordered. "I want to know everything. Every record, every witness, every person who had contact with Elena Blackwood during her time here." "Already on it, sir. Though I suspect Alpha Garrett will be less than cooperative." Ryder's smile was sharp as winter wind. "Leave Alpha Garrett to me." As if summoned by his name, heavy footsteps pounded down the stairs. But it wasn't Garrett who appeared in the doorway. It was Beta Marcus, his face flushed with exertion and fear. "Your Majesty," he panted. "Alpha Garrett requests your immediate presence in his office. He says it's urgent pack business." "I'm sure he does." Ryder didn't move from his position. "Tell Alpha Garrett that his king is currently occupied with more important matters." Marcus swallowed hard. "Sir, he was very insistent." "I don't care if he was performing backflips," Ryder said mildly. "My answer remains the same." The Beta's gaze darted to Arya, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, pity maybe or recognition. "Alpha Garrett specifically mentioned that it concerns historical territorial agreements. He said you'd understand the urgency." This time, Ryder's expression did change. His eyes narrowed, and Arya caught a glimpse of the predator beneath the civilized surface. "Did he now?" Ryder's voice dropped to a purr that raised every hair on Arya's arms. "How convenient." He turned to Arya, and his expression softened again. "I have to handle this, but I'll be back. Tristan will stay with you." "That's not necessary," Arya began, but Ryder was already shaking his head. "It's absolutely necessary. You're under my protection now, which means no one touches you without going through me first." His smile was fierce and beautiful. "And trust me, little one, that's not a fight anyone in this pack would win." He started toward the stairs, then paused. "Arya." "Yes." "Whatever happens next, remember what I told you. You are not worthless. You are not cursed. And you are certainly not alone anymore." With that, he disappeared up the stairs, leaving Arya alone with his Beta and emotions she couldn't begin to untangle. Tristan settled against the wall, his casual posture not quite hiding his alertness. "He's right, you know," he said quietly. "About you not being alone. Ryder doesn't make promises lightly." "I don't understand any of this," Arya admitted. "Yesterday I was just a slave. Today the Alpha King claims I'm under his protection, tells me my mother was someone important." She shook her head. "It feels like a dream. Or a nightmare?" The gentle question made her look up sharply. Tristan was watching her with sympathetic eyes. "Both," she said honestly. They fell into comfortable silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the pack house above them. But that peace shattered when angry voices began echoing down the stairs. Alpha Garrett's roar, and beneath it, another voice Arya didn't recognize. A voice that made her skin crawl with instinctive revulsion. "Told you to keep her contained," the stranger was saying. 22 years of careful work, and you let the Alpha King find her?" "I had no choice," Garrett snarled back. He invoked the right of claiming. "There was nothing I could do." "There's always something you can do. The question is whether you have the stomach for it." Beside her, Tristan had gone perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as if he could see through stone. "Who do you think?" Arya began, but Tristan held up a hand for silence. The stranger's voice continued, cold and calculating. "The collector is not pleased. 22 years of payments, of keeping her suppressed, of ensuring she never discovered what she really is. All of it wasted because you couldn't handle one inspection." "The suppression is still holding," Garrett said desperately. "She still believes she's wolfless. We can salvage this." "Can we?" The stranger's laugh was like broken glass. The Alpha King's presence alone could be enough to crack the bindings. And if she shifts, if she discovers her true nature. The voice trailed off ominously. Let's hope for your sake that doesn't happen, Alpha. Because if it does, the Collector will hold you personally responsible. Footsteps receded, and a door slammed somewhere above them. The sudden silence felt oppressive, pregnant with secrets and threats. Suppression, Tristan murmured, his voice tight with anger. They've been magically suppressing her wolf. The words hit Arya like physical blows. That's impossible, she whispered. I was tested. By pack doctors loyal to Garrett, Tristan said grimly. Arya, if what we just heard is true, you're not wolfless. You never were. Someone has been keeping your wolf bound for your entire life. The revelation should have been liberating. Instead, it felt like another betrayal, another lie in a life built on deception. Rage bubbled up in Arya's chest, not the familiar, hopeless anger she'd lived with for years, but something fiercer, something that seemed to burn in her very bones. 22 years, she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, deeper, rougher. They stole 22 years from me. Arya. Tristan's voice carried a warning. You need to stay calm. If you're right, if you've been suppressed, then strong emotions could. But it was too late. The rage was building, feeding on years of pain and humiliation and lies. Arya felt something deep inside her chest crack, like ice breaking up in spring. Power flooded through her veins, wild and primal and utterly foreign. Her hands began to change. She stared in shock as her fingers elongated, as claws pushed through her nail beds, as dark fur sprouted along her arms. The transformation was incomplete. Her face remained human, her body unchanged, but there was no denying what was happening. She was shifting. Partially, impossibly, she was shifting. Oh, she breathed, her voice now carrying the rough edge of her wolf. Oh, they're going to pay. Above them, something crashed, followed by Alpha Garrett's bellow of rage. Heavy footsteps pounded toward the stairs. Tristan was on his feet instantly, moving to block the entrance. Arya, you need to control this. Now. But Arya was beyond hearing him. 22 years of suppressed wolf was clawing its way to the surface, and with it came a fury that threatened to consume everything in its path. Her partially shifted hands clenched into fists as footsteps thundered down the stairs. Alpha Garrett burst into the dungeon, his face twisted with panic and rage. What did you do? He snarled at Tristan. What did you? His words died as his gaze fell on Arya. His face went white as bone. Impossible, he whispered. Arya rose to her feet, power crackling through her like lightning. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of the wolf that had been denied its voice for far too long. Hello, Alpha, she said, and her smile was all teeth. I think it's time we had a little chat about my mother. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. The black SUV hummed along the mountain highway, carrying Arya away from the only home she'd ever known. Not that the Crimson Moon Pack had ever truly been home. More like a prison where she'd served a life sentence for the crime of existing. She pressed her face against the tinted window, watching pine trees blur past in the pre-dawn darkness. Her hands were human again, the partial shift having receded when Ryder returned to find Alpha Garrett cowering in the corner of the dungeon. Whatever conversation had taken place in Garrett's office had left the Alpha King coldly furious and strangely protective. Sleep, Ryder murmured from the seat beside her. We have several hours before we reach Royal Pack territory. Sleep seemed impossible. Every nerve in her body hummed with newfound awareness, as if someone had turned up the volume on her senses. She could smell the leather seats, the faint cologne Tristan wore, the pine-scented air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. More disturbing, she could sense the emotions of everyone in the vehicle. Tristan's focused alertness, the driver's boredom, and beneath it all, Ryder's tightly controlled turmoil. I can feel you, she said quietly, not looking away from the window. Not just smell, feel. Your emotions, your thoughts, almost. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Ryder spoke, his voice carefully neutral. That's not possible. Mind reading requires years of training and bloodline gifts that only manifest in the most powerful alphas. Arya finished, the knowledge flowing from somewhere deep in her mind. Or in those destined to be Luna Queens. She turned to find Ryder staring at her with an unreadable expression. How do you know that? I don't know. It just came to me. She frowned, pressing fingertips to her temples where a dull ache was building. Ever since the partial shift, it's like there are things in my head that weren't there before. Memories that aren't mine. Knowledge passed down through bloodlines, a voice whispered in her mind, soft and familiar though she'd never heard it before. Gifts that run deeper than wolf blood. Arya gasped, her head whipping around to find the source of the voice. But there was no one else in the SUV, and neither Ryder nor Tristan showed any sign of having heard anything. What is it? Ryder's hand moved toward her, then stopped, his fingers clenching into a fist. You didn't hear that? Hear what? Before Arya could answer, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Her eyelids grew heavy, her body sinking deeper into the plush leather seat. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Ryder's concerned face, etched with shadows she couldn't read. Come to me, daughter. Arya stood in a moonlit forest clearing, her bare feet silent on the moss-covered ground. Everything was silver and shadow, beautiful and ethereal in the way of dreams. But this felt more real than any dream she'd ever experienced. A white wolf emerged from between the trees, her coat gleaming like fresh snow, her eyes the color of molten gold. She was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf Arya had ever seen, and she moved with a grace that spoke of ancient power. You're beautiful, the wolf said, her voice echoing directly in Arya's mind. So much like your father. My father. Arya's dream voice sounded young, uncertain. Who is my father? The white wolf's golden eyes filled with infinite sadness. A king who loved too deeply and lost too much. A man who made choices that bound us all. She patted closer, close enough that Arya could see her own reflection in those ancient eyes. But that is not why I've come. You're in danger, my darling girl. More danger than the Alpha King realizes. You're my mother. It wasn't a question. Somehow, Arya knew with absolute certainty. You're Elena. I am. And I have been trying to reach you for 22 years, fighting against magical barriers that kept you from your true self. Elena's form shimmered, becoming translucent. The suppression is breaking down, but there are those who will kill to keep you from discovering the truth. What truth? What am I? But Elena was already fading, her voice becoming distant. Trust the Alpha King, daughter. His heart is true, even if his hands are bound by oaths he cannot break. And when the assassins come, and they will come, remember that your power is not in your claws or fangs. It's in your ability to unite what has been divided. Mother, wait. I love you, Arya. I have always loved you. Arya jerked awake to find Ryder shaking her gently, his storm-gray eyes tight with concern. You were crying out, he said softly. Calling for your mother. She touched her face and found her cheeks wet with tears. The dream, no, the vision, clung to her consciousness with vivid clarity. Elena's golden eyes, her warning about assassins, her cryptic words about uniting what had been divided. She spoke to me, Arya whispered. In the dream. She warned me about danger. Ryder went very still. What kind of danger? Assassins. She said they would come, and that. The world exploded. The SUV lurched violently to the left as something slammed into the passenger side. Metal shrieked against metal as they spun across the highway, tires screaming against asphalt. Arya was thrown against Ryder, his arms coming up instinctively to shield her as the vehicle rolled. Glass shattered. The smell of gasoline and blood filled the air. And underneath it all, Arya caught the scent of unfamiliar wolves, at least 6 of them, closing in fast. Ambush, Tristan snarled from the front seat, already reaching for his weapon. Professional job. They've been tracking us. The SUV came to rest on its side, and through the spider-webbed windshield, Arya saw figures moving in the darkness. Large shapes that moved with predatory grace, their eyes reflecting the vehicle's headlights. Stay behind me, Ryder commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. But as he started to shift, Arya felt something else awakening inside her. Something vast and powerful and utterly furious. The first assassin reached the wreckage, a massive brown wolf with scars crisscrossing his muzzle. He began to shift to human form, probably to better manipulate the wreckage, but he never completed the transformation. Arya's mind touched his, and suddenly she was inside his thoughts, seeing through his eyes, feeling his intentions like they were her own. The shock of the mental contact sent him stumbling backward with a howl of confusion. What? Ryder began, but Arya was already moving. The suppression that had bound her wolf for 22 years wasn't just cracking. It was shattering like a dam in flood season. Power poured through her, raw and primal and absolutely devastating. Her partial shift was different this time, more complete. Claws erupted from her fingertips, her canine teeth elongated into fangs, and her eyes blazed with golden fire that had nothing to do with her human heritage. She kicked out the back window with strength that should have been impossible for someone her size, then flowed through the opening like liquid shadow. The assassins surrounded the wreckage, 6 massive wolves in attack formation. But when Arya emerged, their formation faltered. She could feel their confusion, their sudden uncertainty bleeding through the mental connections that seemed to form automatically now. "Who sent you?" Her mental voice cracked like a whip across their consciousness, and she felt them recoil from the contact. The gift her mother had spoken of, the ability to touch minds, was fully awakening, and with it came an authority that made even these hardened killers hesitate. The scarred brown wolf who seemed to be their leader tried to rally his pack, but Arya was already moving. She didn't fight like a wolf, she had no training, no experience with combat. Instead, she fought like a force of nature, her newfound abilities guided by instincts older than memory. When the first assassin lunged at her, she caught his mind in hers and twisted, sending him crashing into a tree with a yelp of pain. The second attacker found his thoughts suddenly not his own, his body moving against his will as Arya puppeteered him like a marionette. Behind her, she heard Ryder's roar of fury as he completed his own shift, but she barely registered it. Her attention was focused on the lead assassin, on the mind behind his yellow eyes that was trying desperately to shield itself from her mental intrusion. "I know you," she realized with shock as she finally broke through his defenses. "You were there. The night my mother." The wolf's memories flooded through their connection. A moonlit night 23 years ago, a woman with golden hair fighting desperately against her captors, a man in shadow giving orders in a voice that made even these killers nervous. And underneath it all, the sound of infant cries that were quickly silenced. She tried to escape, the assassin's thoughts betrayed him. "The night you were born, she almost got away. Almost got you both away. But the Alpha King, the old Alpha King." "No," Arya breathed, her partially shifted features contorting with horror. The memories she was seeing couldn't be real. They couldn't be true. But the assassin's mind didn't lie. She saw her mother, young and beautiful and desperate, fighting against wolves who wore the royal crest. Saw a figure in the shadows, a man whose face she couldn't quite make out, but whose presence radiated absolute authority. The previous Alpha King, Ryder's predecessor. Her father. The realization hit her like a physical blow, so devastating that her hold on the assassin's mind shattered. They regrouped quickly, sensing her moment of weakness, but before they could attack, Ryder was there. His wolf form was magnificent and terrifying, silver-gray fur gleaming in the moonlight, massive body moving with deadly grace. He tore through the assassins like they were made of paper, his fury at seeing Arya threatened transforming him into an avatar of vengeance. But Arya barely saw the battle. She was trapped in the memories she'd stolen, watching her mother's final moments over and over again. Watching as the woman who'd tried so desperately to save her daughter was dragged away into the darkness, never to be seen again. When the last assassin fell, silence descended over the wreckage. Ryder shifted back to human form, his body covered in cuts and bruises, but his eyes immediately seeking Arya. She stood frozen in the middle of the carnage, her partial shift still active, golden eyes wide with shock and betrayal. "Arya." His voice was gentle, cautious. "Are you hurt?" She turned to look at him, and he took an instinctive step backward at what he saw in her face. "You knew," she said, and her voice carried the rough edge of her wolf. "All this time, you knew who I was." Ryder's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me." The words exploded from her with such force that nearby trees shook. "I can see it in your mind, feel the guilt eating at you. You've known about me for years, haven't you? Known I was alive, known I was being held prisoner, known I was being tortured and suppressed, and—" "I was bound," Ryder said quietly. "Magically bound by oaths I couldn't break. Contracts signed in blood that prevented me from—" "From what? From saving me? From telling me the truth?" Arya's laugh was bitter and broken. "What truth, Ryder? That my father was the previous Alpha King? That I'm not just some random Alpha's bastard daughter, I'm royalty." The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Ryder's face had gone white, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "How did you?" "The assassin's memories. I saw everything." Arya's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any scream. "My mother tried to escape with me the night I was born. She almost made it, too. But your predecessor, my father, sent his wolves after her. And when they brought her back—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The memories were too fresh, too devastating. "Arya, please." Ryder stepped toward her, his hand extended. "Let me explain. The contracts, the magical bindings." "Explain what?" That I'm your stepsister by law. That everything between us is forbidden not just by pack law, but by blood. Arya's partially shifted form was trembling with emotion. Tell me, Ryder, when you looked at me in that dungeon, when you felt whatever this is between us, did you know who I was? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Ryder spoke, his voice barely audible. Yes. The single word hit Arya like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was breaking all over again. The attraction you feel, she said with devastating clarity. The pull between us, it's not real, is it? It's just some sick cosmic joke. The moon goddess's way of punishing us for the sins of our fathers. That's not true, Ryder said desperately. What I feel for you is real, Arya. More real than anything I've ever experienced. The fact that we're connected by law doesn't change. Doesn't change what? That I'm legally your sister? That any relationship between us would be seen as incestuous? That I'm the daughter of the man who destroyed my mother? Arya's voice cracked with anguish. Or doesn't change the fact that you let me suffer for years rather than risk breaking your precious magical contracts. Tristan cleared his throat carefully from where he stood guard by the wreckage. Your Majesty, we need to move. There will be more assassins coming. But Arya was already backing away, her golden eyes never leaving Ryder's face. No, I'm done running. I'm done being someone else's pawn, someone else's secret to keep. Arya, wait. She turned and ran into the forest, her partially shifted form giving her speed and agility that made pursuit nearly impossible. Behind her, she heard Ryder roar her name, but she didn't look back. She couldn't look back. Not when every glance at him reminded her of the impossible situation they were in, of the lies and secrets that had shaped her entire existence. As she ran deeper into the darkness, Elena's words echoed in her mind. Your power is not in your claws or fangs. It's in your ability to unite what has been divided. But how could she unite anything when she herself was more broken and divided than ever? The moon hung full and blood-red overhead, casting everything in shades of silver and crimson. A blood moon, the werewolf's sign of change, of transformation, of endings that became new beginnings. Arya ran beneath its light, her heart shattered but her spirit finally, truly free, with no idea that her flight into the darkness would set in motion events that would reshape the entire werewolf world. Behind her, Ryder stood in the wreckage of their convoy and their tentative bond, watching the woman he'd fallen for disappear into shadows that seemed to welcome her like a long-lost daughter coming home. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The royal palace was everything Arya had never allowed herself to dream of, soaring marble columns, crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow light across polished floors, tapestries that told the history of werewolf royalty in threads of gold and silver. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the most elaborate prison she'd ever known. 3 days had passed since Ryder's trackers found her unconscious at the base of a waterfall, her body finally succumbing to exhaustion after her flight through the forest. 3 days of silk sheets and 4-poster beds, of servants who called her, Your Highness, and backed away when she entered a room, of meals that went untouched because her stomach churned every time she tried to eat. 3 days of avoiding Ryder. It wasn't difficult. The palace was vast, and he seemed as intent on avoiding her as she was him. The few times their paths had crossed in corridors or courtyards, the air between them crackled with unresolved tension and words they couldn't say. Step-siblings by law, drawn together by forces neither could control, torn apart by secrets and lies that ran deeper than either had imagined. Arya stood now at the window of her assigned chamber, watching the sun set over the royal gardens. Somewhere in those perfectly manicured grounds, Ryder was probably training with his warriors, working off the same restless energy that kept her pacing her room like a caged animal. Your Highness. The soft voice made Arya turn from the window. A young servant girl stood in the doorway, her eyes downcast. Elder Sebastian requests your presence in his study. He says it's regarding your educational needs. Elder Sebastian, Ryder's most trusted advisor, the man who'd supposedly been searching for ways to safely break the magical suppression on her wolf. Tall and distinguished with silver hair and kind eyes, he'd been nothing but helpful since her arrival. Yet something about him made her skin crawl. Tell Elder Sebastian I'll be there shortly, Arya said, forcing politeness into her voice. The servant curtsied and disappeared, leaving Arya alone with her unease. In the 3 days since her arrival, Sebastian had been insistent about private meetings, claiming he needed to assess her magical education, understand the extent of her emerging abilities. But every session left her feeling drained and oddly empty, as if something vital had been siphoned away. She made her way through the palace corridors, her bare feet silent on the marble floors. The servants had offered her shoes, dozens of pairs in every imaginable style, but she preferred the connection to the ground, the ability to feel vibrations through the stone. Sebastian's study was in the west wing, a circular room lined floor to ceiling with ancient tomes and scrolls. Moonlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the Persian rugs. The elder himself sat behind an ornate desk, his fingers steepled as he studied a leather-bound journal. "Ah, Arya." His smile was warm, grandfatherly. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." She settled into the chair across from his desk, noting how the cushions seemed to embrace her with unusual warmth. Magic, she realized with growing alarm. The entire room hummed with it. "You've been avoiding the Alpha King," Sebastian observed, his pale eyes studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "That's understandable, given the complications of your situation. Is that what we're calling it? Complications?" Arya's voice carried an edge she didn't try to hide. "I prefer cosmic joke myself." Sebastian chuckled, the sound somehow making her skin crawl. "You have your mother's spirit." Elena was always quick with words, always ready to fight against fate. Something in his tone made Arya stiffen. "You knew my mother." "Oh, my dear girl." Sebastian's smile widened, and for the first time, it didn't reach his eyes. "I knew your mother intimately." The words hit her like ice water. Arya shot to her feet, every instinct screaming danger, but her body felt sluggish, unresponsive. The warm cushions, she realized with growing horror. They'd been drugged with something. "Sit down, daughter." The command carried supernatural force that drove her back into the chair against her will. But it was the word daughter that made her blood freeze. "No," she whispered, but even as she spoke, she could see the truth in Sebastian's face. The pale eyes that matched her own when she wasn't shifted. The aristocratic bone structure that mirrored her human features. The smile that held no warmth, no love, only cold calculation. "Yes," Sebastian said softly. "I am your father, Arya. The one who gave you life, the one who spent 23 years ensuring you never became powerful enough to threaten me. You raped her." The words tore from Arya's throat like a physical wound. "You raped my mother and then—" "I claimed what was mine by right," Sebastian corrected, his voice mild as if they were discussing the weather. "Elena was promised to me in marriage, you see. An alliance between our families, arranged when she was still a child. But she was reluctant to honor that arrangement. She chose to run instead, to place herself under the old Alpha King's protection." Arya's vision blurred with rage and horror. Through their incomplete bond, she could feel her suppressed wolf clawing desperately to break free. But whatever drug Sebastian had used was designed specifically to keep her contained. "So you took her anyway," she said, her voice shaking. "You violated her, got her pregnant, and then what? Let them raise me as a slave." "I did what was necessary." Sebastian rose from his chair, moving to a cabinet filled with vials and bottles that gleamed like jewels in the moonlight. "Your bloodline, combined with mine, makes you incredibly dangerous. The old Alpha King recognized this. It's why he agreed to help me contain you." The room spun around Arya as the implications hit her. Ryder's predecessor, he knew? He orchestrated it. Sebastian selected a vial filled with silver liquid, holding it up to the light. Magnus Stormwind was many things, but he was no fool. He understood that your potential power could destabilize everything he'd built. So we made an agreement. He would take Elena as his mistress, claim you as his bastard daughter, and I would ensure you remained safely suppressed. But something went wrong, Arya said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "My mother tried to escape. Elena was stronger than either of us anticipated. She broke free of the palace the night you were born, nearly made it to the border before our wolves caught her." Sebastian's expression darkened with old anger. "She died protecting you, trying to keep you from the life we'd planned. So you let them think I was just another bastard. Let them torture me, abuse me, make me believe I was worthless." Arya's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 22 years of pain. "I let them keep you contained until I decided what to do with you. The Collector, that's what they called me in their coded messages. Paying Garrett handsomely to ensure you remained broken, powerless, unaware of your true nature." Sebastian moved closer, his footsteps eerily silent on the thick rugs. But then young Ryder began asking questions. started investigating old contracts, old agreements. It became clear that he would eventually discover you. So you had him find me. Understanding dawned like a cold sunrise. The inspection of Garrett's pack, that wasn't coincidence. Nothing is coincidence when you've lived as long as I have, daughter. I orchestrated Ryder's discovery of you, guided his protective instincts, even encouraged his growing attachment. Sebastian's smile was sharp as a blade. After all, what better way to control the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories than through his mate bond? We're not mated, Arya said desperately. The law forbids. The law forbids many things that happen anyway. And Ryder's feelings for you are quite real, whatever the legal complications. Sebastian was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. Which brings us to tonight's entertainment. He lifted the silver vial, and Arya's wolf recoiled in terror from whatever was inside it. What is that? A choice, Sebastian said simply. Or rather, the means to force someone else to make a choice. You see, my dear daughter, I've grown tired of managing your existence. 23 years of careful suppression, of maintaining the delicate balance between keeping you contained and keeping you alive, it's become tedious. The study door opened without a sound and Ryder strode in, his face tight with worry. Arya? I felt your distress through the... He stopped short, his storm-gray eyes taking in the scene before him. Sebastian? What's going on here? Ah, your majesty. Perfect timing. Sebastian's smile was all teeth. I was just explaining to young Arya the facts of her existence. The contracts, the arrangements, the choices that have led us to this moment. Ryder's gaze flicked between them, and Arya saw the exact moment he noticed the family resemblance. His face went white as bone. You, he breathed. You're the collector. You're her. Father, yes. And your most trusted advisor, your magical consultant, your dear mentor who's been whispering in your ear for the past 5 years. Sebastian lifted the silver vial higher, and whatever was inside it seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Tell me, Ryder, have you ever wondered why your magical contracts were so binding? Why you found it impossible to break free and save your beloved stepsister from her suffering? Because you made sure they couldn't be broken, Ryder said, his voice rough with dawning horror. You crafted them specifically to keep you exactly where I wanted you, yes. Powerful enough to maintain order, but bound by oaths that prevented you from interfering with my plans. Sebastian's pale eyes glittered with malice. But now those plans have evolved. He held up the vial, so both Ryder and Arya could see its contents clearly. The silver liquid moved with its own current, and looking at it made Arya's suppressed wolf whimper in terror. This is liquid moonbane, Sebastian explained conversationally. Concentrated essence of the one metal that can permanently damage a werewolf's connection to their wolf spirit. 1 dose of this, properly administered, will sever Arya's connection to her supernatural abilities forever. She'll become fully human, weak mortal, harmless. You bastard, Ryder snarled, but Sebastian raised a hand for silence. I'm not finished. You see, the beauty of liquid moonbane is that it must be administered willingly. The subject has to choose to drink it, or it won't work. So here's your choice, Ryder. Sebastian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Convince Arya to drink this willingly, thus saving her life but stripping her of everything that makes her a threat to me, and you can keep your throne. Refuse, and I'll activate a curse I placed on her the moment she entered this palace. She'll die slowly, painfully, as her suppressed wolf finally breaks free and tears her apart from the inside. The silence that followed was deafening. Arya felt Ryder's anguish through their incomplete bond, felt him weighing impossible choices with no good outcomes. There's a third option, she said quietly, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. You could let me go. Let me leave the palace, renounce any claim to royal blood, disappear completely. Oh, my dear child. Sebastian's laugh was like broken glass. You still don't understand. This was never about royal succession or political power. This is about the ritual. What ritual? Ryder demanded. Sebastian moved to his desk, opening the leather journal he'd been studying when Arya arrived. The pages were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, diagrams that seemed to shift and writhe in the candlelight. For centuries, humans have been the inferior species. Weaker, shorter-lived, helpless against our supernatural abilities. But what if that could change? What if there was a way to strip every werewolf in existence of their wolf spirits, to reduce them to merely human status? Horror dawned on both Arya and Ryder simultaneously. You're talking about genocide, Ryder said, his voice deadly quiet. I'm talking about evolution. The humans have already begun developing technologies that could threaten us: weapons, surveillance, genetic manipulation. How long before they turn those advances against us? Better to level the playing field while we still can. Sebastian turned a page in the journal, revealing a ritual circle drawn in what looked like dried blood. The spell requires a specific sacrifice, the blood of a royal werewolf willingly given during the dark of the moon. Aria's mixed heritage makes her perfect for the ritual. Royal blood from her father, ancient power from her mother's lineage, and a lifetime of suppression that's made her wolf spirit incredibly concentrated. "I'll never cooperate," Aria said, though the drug made her voice sound weak to her own ears. "You will," Sebastian said with absolute confidence. "Because if you don't, I'll ensure that everyone you've ever cared about pays the price. Every servant who showed you kindness at the Crimson Moon Pack, every wolf who's sworn loyalty to Ryder, every innocent werewolf in the territory. They'll all suffer for your selfishness." The threat hung in the air like poison. Through the magical bond that had formed despite everything between them, Aria felt Ryder's desperate search for alternatives, his mind racing through possibilities that all ended in disaster. "Choose wisely," Sebastian continued, moving toward the door. "You have until midnight to decide. Drink the moonbane and live as a human, or watch everyone you care about burn while I find another way to complete my ritual." He paused at the threshold, his pale eyes reflecting the candlelight like a predator's. "Oh, and don't think about trying to escape. This room is warded specifically against your abilities, and I've posted guards who have explicit orders to shoot first and ask questions later." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Aria and Ryder alone with an impossible choice and the ticking of a clock that counted down to midnight. "We have to find another way," Ryder said immediately, moving to examine the windows, the walls, searching for any weakness in Sebastian's magical prison. But Aria was looking at the journal Sebastian had left behind, at the ritual circles and blood-soaked symbols that promised the extinction of everything they were. "There is no other way," she said softly. "He's planned this for decades. Every move, every contingency, every possible escape route, he's thought of it all." "Don't you dare give up," Ryder said fiercely, turning to face her with blazing eyes. "I won't let him win. I won't let him destroy you or use you to destroy everyone else. And what would you sacrifice to stop him? Your throne? Your people? Your life?" Aria met his gaze steadily, seeing the answer in his storm-gray eyes. "You would, wouldn't you? You'd give up everything. For you." Without hesitation. The simple honesty in his voice broke something inside her chest. Step-siblings by law, impossible love by choice, united by fate and torn apart by the sins of their fathers. But in this moment, none of that mattered. "I can't let you do that," she whispered. "I can't let anyone else suffer because of what I am." Before Ryder could stop her, she lunged for the silver vial Sebastian had left on the desk. But her drug-weakened reflexes betrayed her, and Ryder caught her wrist just as her fingers closed around the glass. "No," he said firmly. "We find another way." The door burst open before either of them could move. Armed guards flooded the room, their weapons trained not on Aria but on Ryder. Sebastian followed them in, his grandfatherly mask completely discarded now, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "I'm afraid your time for discussion has expired," he said pleasantly. "Seize them both." Aria tried to fight as rough hands grabbed her arms, tried to call on her wolf, her emerging powers, anything that might help her resist. But Sebastian's drugs and magical wards held firm, leaving her helpless as they dragged her from the room. The last thing she saw was Ryder's face, twisted with rage and desperation as more guards overwhelmed him, and the cold satisfaction in Sebastian's pale eyes as he watched his carefully laid plans finally come to fruition. "The ritual chamber is prepared," she heard one of the guards say as they hauled her through corridors that had once seemed beautiful and now felt like the halls of hell itself. "Excellent," Sebastian replied, his voice fading as distance grew between them. "Begin the preparations. Tonight we change the world." As they dragged her deeper into the palace, toward whatever fresh horror awaited her in Sebastian's ritual chamber, Aria closed her eyes and sent a silent prayer to her mother's spirit. "I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I'm sorry I couldn't save them all." But in the depths of her suppressed wolf, something stirred in response, not despair but rage. Pure, crystalline rage that burned through Sebastian's magical restraints like acid through silk. The ritual required her willing cooperation, her voluntary sacrifice. Sebastian was about to discover that his daughter had inherited more than just his pale eyes and aristocratic features. She'd inherited his capacity for ruthless calculation. And unlike him, she'd learned what it truly meant to fight for something worth dying for. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The ritual chamber lay deep beneath the royal palace, carved from living rock that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Ancient symbols covered every surface, their meanings lost to time but their power undeniable. Candles burned at precise intervals around a massive stone altar, their flames casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with purpose. Arya knelt in the center of a ritual circle drawn in what she desperately hoped wasn't human blood, silver chains binding her wrists and ankles. The metal burned against her skin, designed to prevent any werewolf from breaking free. But she was no ordinary werewolf, something Sebastian was about to learn. Beautiful, isn't it? Sebastian's voice echoed off the stone walls as he descended the curved staircase, now dressed in ceremonial robes that made him look like the dark sorcerer he'd always been. This chamber has been used for rituals since before the first werewolf kingdoms were established. Tonight, it witnesses the birth of a new world. Tonight it witnesses your death, Arya said quietly, testing the strength of her bonds. The silver burned, but underneath the pain she could feel something stirring, her wolf finally truly awakening. Sebastian laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls like broken glass. Still defiant? How wonderfully like your mother. Elena said almost those exact words the night I took what was mine. Rage flared in Arya's chest, white-hot and pure. Don't you dare speak of her. Oh, but I must. After all, she's the reason we're here. Sebastian moved to a stone table covered with ritual implements. Knives, bowls, vials of substances that gleamed like poisoned jewels. Did you know she tried to bargain with me? Offered her own life in exchange for yours. The words hit Arya like physical blows, but Sebastian wasn't finished. I told her the same thing I'm telling you now. There is no bargaining with destiny. You were always meant for this moment, this purpose. The prophesied bridge walker, born to unite what has been divided. His smile was cold as winter dawn. Though I suppose you'll be bridging life and death instead of species. Bridgewalker. Despite everything, Arya couldn't hide her confusion. You don't know. Sebastian paused in his preparations, genuine surprise flickering across his face. Of course you don't. I made sure Elena never had the chance to tell you, and I certainly wasn't going to enlighten you myself. He selected a curved blade from the table, its metal dark as midnight. The prophecy speaks of a wolf born of two bloodlines, royal and common, light and dark, power and humility. A bridgewalker who would unite all supernatural species under one rule, bringing an end to centuries of conflict between werewolves, vampires, fae, and witches. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. That's impossible. I'm just what? Just a broken slave? Just a wolfless nothing. Sebastian's laugh was bitter. You're the most powerful creature born in 5 centuries, daughter mine. Why do you think I spent so much effort keeping you suppressed? Above them, the sound of battle echoed through the palace, shouts, growls, the clash of steel against claw. Rider, Arya realized with a surge of desperate hope. He was coming for her. Your lover is quite persistent, Sebastian observed, tilting his head to listen to the chaos above. But he's too late. The ritual has already begun. As if summoned by his words, power began to flow through the carved symbols on the walls. The candle flames grew higher, their light taking on an unnatural blue tint. The very air seemed to thicken with magic so dark it made Arya's skin crawl. The moon reaches its zenith, Sebastian said, checking an ornate pocket watch. And I confess, I'm curious to see what happens when I bleed the bridge walker dry. Will the supernatural world simply end, or will it transform into something entirely new? He approached the ritual circle, the midnight blade gleaming in the candlelight. But as he raised it above Arya's bound form, she felt something shift inside her. Not just her wolf, but something deeper, older, more profound. Now, daughter. Elena's voice rang clear as crystal bells in Arya's mind, and suddenly the chamber filled with silver light. A massive white wolf materialized between Arya and Sebastian, her golden eyes blazing with fury and love in equal measure. Sebastian stumbled backward, his face contorting with shock and rage. Impossible. You're dead. I killed you myself. You killed my body. Elena's spirit voice carried power that made the very stones tremble. But love transcends death, and a mother's protection knows no bounds. She turned her magnificent head toward Arya, golden eyes soft with infinite tenderness. It's time, my darling girl. Time to become who you were always meant to be. The silver chains binding Arya began to smoke and crack. Power flooded through her veins like liquid fire, washing away 23 years of suppression in a single glorious wave. Her wolf, not the broken, incomplete creature she'd glimpsed before, but something magnificent and terrible and absolutely free, rose within her like the sun breaking over the horizon. The transformation was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Her bones reshaped themselves without pain, her muscles flowing like water into new configurations. Pure white fur sprouted across her skin, and when she opened her eyes, she knew they blazed with the same golden fire as her mother's. The silver chains shattered like glass. Arya rose to her full height, not just as a wolf but as something more. The Bridge Walker, the prophesied uniters, the creature born to bring all supernatural beings under one rule. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in the bones of every living thing. "Hello, Father." Sebastian had gone pale as death, the ritual blade trembling in his hands. "This changes nothing. I still have the power to." "You have nothing." Arya's mental voice cracked like a whip, and Sebastian stumbled backward as if physically struck. "Did you think I couldn't smell the lies on you? The dark magic you've been using to maintain your position, to extend your life, to keep others under your control?" She began to advance, and with each step, the carved symbols on the walls began to change. Instead of the dark, twisted sigils Sebastian had created, they transformed into something else. Symbols of unity, of healing, of bridges built between divided shores. "You are not my father," Arya continued, her power growing with each word. "You are a parasite who has stolen the life force of others for decades. You are a violator, a murderer, a creature so consumed with your own power that you forgot what it means to be truly strong. I gave you life." Sebastian snarled, raising the blade again. "I am your creator, your—" The ritual chamber door exploded inward, stone and metal flying like shrapnel. Ryder burst through the opening, his wolf form magnificent and terrible in its fury, followed by Tristan and what looked like half the royal guard. But he stopped short when he saw Arya, not the broken girl he'd rescued, but a white alpha wolf whose presence filled the entire chamber with light. Ryder! Even in wolf form, even through the supernatural chaos surrounding them, their bond sang with perfect clarity. "You came." "Always," he replied, his own mental voice rough with emotion. "I'll always come for you." Sebastian's face twisted with desperate rage. "Touching. But this ends now." He raised the ritual blade high, dark magic crackling around the metal like black lightning. "If I cannot have the Bridge Walker's willing sacrifice, I'll take her death." He lunged forward, the blade aimed at Arya's heart. But instead of dodging, instead of fighting back with claws and fangs, Arya did something that shocked everyone in the chamber. She opened her arms and embraced him. "I forgive you," she said, her mental voice carrying such profound compassion that several of the guards gasped audibly. "Not for my sake, but for yours. You have carried hatred and fear for so long that you've forgotten what it means to be anything else." The moment her arms closed around Sebastian, light exploded from her body. Not the harsh, burning light of destruction, but the warm, healing glow of absolute forgiveness. Sebastian screamed as decades of stolen power began to flow out of him, not violently torn away, but gently reclaimed by the universe itself. The dark magic he'd accumulated turned to silver mist and dissipated. The extended life he'd stolen returned to its rightful place in the natural order. The fear and hatred that had sustained him for so long simply ended. When the light faded, Arya stood in her human form once again, naked but unashamed, cradling the body of an old man who looked ancient beyond measure. Sebastian's pale eyes, no longer sharp with malice, looked up at her with something that might have been wonder. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Because that's what bridge walkers do," Arya said gently. "We don't destroy the bridges that need burning. We heal them." Sebastian's eyes closed for the final time, and his body crumbled to dust that was immediately absorbed by the healing stones of the chamber floor. Where he had lain, a single white flower bloomed, a symbol of redemption earned and forgiveness granted. The ritual chamber fell silent except for the sound of everyone's breathing. Then, slowly, Ryder shifted back to human form and approached Arya, offering her his shirt to cover herself. "Is it over?" he asked softly. Before Arya could answer, the air in the chamber shimmered like heat waves, and a figure appeared that made everyone drop to their knees in instinctive reverence. She was tall and ethereal, with silver hair that flowed like moonlight and eyes that held the wisdom of eternity. Power radiated from her in waves that spoke of divine origin. The moon goddess herself had come to witness what transpired. "Rise," her voice echoed in their minds, gentle but utterly commanding. "There is much to discuss." Slowly, carefully, they got to their feet. Arya found herself standing directly before the goddess, feeling simultaneously terrified and oddly comforted by her presence. "You have proven yourself, Bridge Walker," the moon goddess said, her attention focused on Arya. "Not through violence or dominance, but through the rarest power of all, the strength to forgive those who have wronged you." "I don't understand," Arya said aloud, her voice small in the vast chamber. "I'm not strong. I couldn't even save myself. Strength is not measured by what you can destroy, child, but by what you choose to build." The goddess turned her ageless gaze to Ryder. "And you, young king, you chose love over crown, sacrifice over safety. Tell me, do you regret that choice?" "Never," Ryder said without hesitation, moving to stand beside Arya. "I would make the same choice 1,000 times over, even knowing it would cost you your throne. Even then." The moon goddess smiled, and the expression transformed her austere features into something warm and maternal. "Then you have both learned what it truly means to rule, not through fear or power, but through love and sacrifice. You are worthy of a greater destiny than either of you imagined." She raised her hands, and silver light began to emanate from her palms, swirling around Arya and Ryder like a living thing. "By choosing love over power, you have proven yourselves worthy to be the first dual alpha rulers in werewolf history. Together, you will usher in a new age of peace between all supernatural beings. Together, you will build bridges where others have built walls." The silver light intensified, and Arya felt something shift inside her chest, not painful but profound. Her bond with Ryder, which had been incomplete and complicated by law and circumstance, suddenly blazed to full life. She could feel his heart beating in time with hers, could sense his thoughts and emotions as clearly as her own. But there was something else, too, a warmth spreading through her abdomen, a presence that was both foreign and utterly familiar. "Yes," the moon goddess said, noting Arya's shocked expression. "You carry the next generation within you. Twins, born of true love and destined to herald the new age of unity between all supernatural species. They will be the first of their kind, bridge walkers like their mother, but with the added gift of their father's noble strength." Arya's hand flew to her stomach, where she could now sense the tiny sparks of life growing within her. "But how?" "We never." The mate bond, once fully activated, transcends physical limitations. Your souls recognized each other from the moment you met, and that recognition has borne fruit. The goddess's smile was gentle but knowing. "Besides, do you think a bridge walker would conceive children through anything so mundane as mere physical contact?" Despite everything they'd been through, despite the cosmic magnitude of what was happening around them, Arya found herself laughing. Pure, joyous laughter that filled the ritual chamber and transformed it from a place of dark magic into something bright and hopeful. Ryder's arm came around her waist, pulling her close against his side. "Twins," he said softly, wonder and joy coloring his voice. "Are you ready to be parents to the children who'll change the world? Are you ready to rule beside a woman who was raised as a slave and still doesn't know which fork to use at formal dinners?" Arya countered, grinning up at him. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The moon goddess watched their exchange with obvious approval. "Then let the coronation begin." She raised her hands again, and the entire chamber transformed around them. The rough stone walls became polished marble, the ritual altar became a raised dais, and the carved symbols became beautiful frescoes depicting the unity of all supernatural species. Silver light filled the space, washing away every trace of Sebastian's dark magic. "Kneel," the goddess commanded, and they did, not as subjects before a ruler, but as equals before the divine force that governed their kind. "Arya Blackwood, daughter of Elena the Pure Heart, you are hereby crowned Alpha Queen of all werewolf territories. Your duty is to protect the innocent, guide the lost, and build bridges between those who believe themselves enemies." A crown of silver light settled on Arya's head, warm and weightless but unmistakably real. "Ryder Stormwind, son of Marcus the Just, you are hereby crowned Alpha King, partner and equal to your queen. Your duty is to stand beside her in all things, to offer strength when she needs support, and to help her carry the burdens that come with such power." A matching crown appeared on Ryder's head, its light intertwining with Arya's until they blazed as one. "Together, you will rule not through dominance but through love. Together, you will unite what has been divided. Together, you will raise the children who will inherit a world transformed. The coronation light faded, leaving them still kneeling, but somehow fundamentally changed. Arya could feel the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but it didn't feel burdensome. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Rise, Alpha King and Queen," the moon goddess said. "Rise and claim your destiny." They stood together, hand in hand, crowns of starlight upon their heads, and the future of all supernatural beings resting in their joined hearts. Above them, through gaps in the stone ceiling, the blood moon was finally setting, giving way to the gentle light of dawn. A new day was beginning, not just for them, but for everyone. The age of the Bridgewalker had begun. In Arya's womb, two tiny hearts began to beat in perfect synchrony with their parents, already carrying within them the power to unite what centuries of hatred had torn apart. And in the space between worlds, Elena's spirit finally found peace, knowing that her daughter would not only survive, but would heal the wounds that had plagued their kind for generations. Love had conquered power, forgiveness had conquered hatred, and unity had conquered division. It was, Arya thought as Ryder's arms tightened around her, exactly what her mother had always dreamed of. The perfect ending that was really just the beginning. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.